Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Success in Africa Leadership Podcast. My name is Dr. Modupe Taylor-Pearce, and I am a scholar and practitioner of leadership and organizational development. Simply put, I study what makes people successful. I have been studying this for 3 decades with a particular focus on people in Africa. And in this podcast, I share stories, lessons, and insights about people having success in Africa. Why this podcast? Because I have a vision for Africa. I have a vision for Africa becoming a high-income continent by 2040. And for that to happen, I need you and every other African watching or listening to this podcast to become successful. So, if you want to be successful in Africa, I encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast. This episode is brought to you courtesy of BCA Online, the one-stop shop for mastering leadership. Joining BCA Online is free, and it gives you access to countless hours of knowledge, videos, and a plethora of resources on leadership that will enhance your capacity. If you have questions that you want me to answer after watching this video, just log on to BCA Online. The link is on the screen, and post your questions there. That is where I will respond. Today, I'm especially excited because I'm going to start a 5-part series on culture. As I mentioned to you, the purpose of this podcast is to help each and every African to become successful. Now, in my research, having looked into people who are successful across the world and looked into Africa and studied what are the behaviors that create success, I have shared with you lots and lots of these behaviors and these journeys by telling you the stories of others. One of the realities that we have come to grips with is the fact that more people in Africa are not finding success than in other cultures. And that has led me to ask why. What is it about our culture that may be inhibiting us from being successful? So, first, let me explain what I mean by culture. Culture, every place has a culture. Every family has a culture. Every community has a culture. Every country, tribe has a culture. Every home has a culture. Because culture is the sum total of the behaviors that are rewarded plus the behaviors that are tolerated minus the behaviors that are punished. In every community, country, family, we have behaviors that are rewarded, we have behaviors that may be tolerated, and we have behaviors that are punished. Now, I have looked into African cultures, tribes, communities, East, West, Southern, Northern Africa. And there are 5 aspects of African culture that I have come to realize are holding us back from being successful. Today, I will share with you the first of the 5. Before I start sharing with you about it, let me be just clear about something. Each one of these 5 aspects has some good elements. In fact, we cherish them. We consider them part of what makes us African. So I share these observations not to say we don't want you to be an African or not to be revolutionary about who I am as an African, but really to look at it dispassionately and recognize what parts of our behaviors are holding us back from being able to have a developed, high-income continent and filled with high-income people. So, without further ado, let me share this first one. It is our reverence for seniority. Reverence for seniority. Notice I use the word reverence for seniority. I did not say respect for seniority. Let me define the word reverence. See, across Africa, seniority is respected. It is revered. It is deeply entrenched in who we are. Older people are venerated. Elders are respected. In families, the firstborn enjoys special rights over others. It's natural. It's normal for us. You see it everywhere, in organizations, institutions, etc. If somebody is senior to you, even in a church, reverence is expected. Disagreeing with seniors publicly is often punished and frowned upon. When senior people make mistakes, pointing them out is considered unacceptable. That is reverence. See, respect for seniority refers to acknowledging somebody's position, giving them their proper title. However, you can respect someone and yet disagree with them. But reverence means that once that senior person has said A, that's it. You cannot go against it. You cannot say that you disagree or you're not going to follow it. That is reverence. Let me give you an example. This is a true story. In West Africa, a major, large, old school, educational institution is owned by a major church denomination. The board of directors of that school is chaired by the bishop of that church denomination. This is a school that's been around for over 100 years. And the board of directors is composed of men of stature, educated people, people who've been successful in other careers. But this school happened to be in decline. And 3 years ago, in a board meeting, a friend of mine, we'll call him John, was in the board meeting. There had been some issues of potential financial misappropriation and lapses in following procedures. And John had information and evidence to show that the bishop had been involved in some of these transactions. When this issue was being discussed in the board meeting, the bishop told a lie. He claimed that he was not aware and had not been part of these actions. John knew that the bishop had been part of these actions, and he knew of 2 other board members who were present at the meeting who knew that the bishop was part of these actions. So John confronted the bishop. and said, "My Lord Bishop, I don't believe that this may be accurate. What we have been made to understand is that you were part of this, etc., etc." The bishop banged his hands on the table, glared at John, and said, "Are you trying to tell me that I am lying? Are you telling me that I am lying?" And then he looked at the rest of the board and said, "See how this man is disrespecting me. See how this man is telling me that I am a liar." What happened next was very aligned to African culture. The other board members recoiled and started to try to placate the bishop. And then they turned on John and said that John should apologize to the bishop. And these people included the two other board members whom John knew that they knew that the bishop had lied. After the meeting, John approached the other two board members, distraught, and asking why they did not support him. Their answer was very simple. They said, John, we know that the bishop lied, but a big man should not be brought to disgrace like that. It's not right. Should not to be brought to disgrace. You see, folks, this type of situation is playing itself across Africa. Interesting postlude to the story. That school has run into further financial difficulties, and it was not turned around. It is now in financial distress. You see, in organizations, reverence for seniority results not only in people of senior position or senior age being able to act with impunity, but it also results in people being promoted to positions of authority strictly because they've been around for a long time, tenure, or they are just older, as opposed to that they are the most competent. This is a problem. Why? Because when you promote less capable people and they are not held to account because they are older, because they are senior, because they have higher titles, it discourages performance excellence. Younger people will say to themselves, well, what's the point of really proving my competence if promotion is based solely on tenure? It also discourages innovation and risk-taking. Why take risks when the rewards are based only on age? It then also creates a situation in which you have less competent people in charge and they malign and sideline the more competent people under them because they don't want to be shown up. And they also know that they have some levels of impunity. This happens in families. The oldest sibling is granted decision-making authority regardless of whether he or she has the greater competence. Many family-owned businesses have been destroyed this way. Because the reality is this: there's no correlation between age and intelligence. God does not give talent based on seniority and age. And yet, attempts to bypass these norms are met with resistance and estrangement. This is one of the reasons why we are poor in Africa, because our organizations struggle to go from one generation to another because we insist on handing it over to the most senior. Because our organizations fail to make good decisions on tough issues, because even when we have corporate governance, in theory, with boards, we happily cede authority to the chair of the board that the chair of the board should not have. Because as the chair of the board, you are simply the first among equals. But because we have a reverence for seniority, when the chair says this, everybody else says, well, the chair has spoken. There's another aspect of how this impoverishes us. When younger people have great ideas or great talent and they're entrepreneurs, they start their companies. You may be one of them listening to this episode. Because of your reverence for seniority, you are afraid to hire people who are older than you. Why? Because you find it difficult to hold them accountable. So what then happens is that you fill your company with people of younger age than you. Here's the problem with that. There's a difference between being able to create a product or service at a small scale and being able to produce it on a large scale. That requires the type of experience, the type of expertise that you may not be able to find if you exclusively look for people who are younger than you. And so there are companies that have been successful when they are small, but struggle to grow past a certain level because they are filled with younger people who are great energy, but not good experience. Why? Because the founder is unable, unwilling, or afraid to hire experienced senior people. Why? Because he or she has a reverence for seniority and doesn't want to be in a situation in which they have to hold somebody accountable that is older than them or old enough to be their father. Let me also share a slightly darker outcome of this. This reverence for seniority is one of the reasons why there are high incidents of pedophilia, child abuse, and sexual abuse in Africa. Why? Because children are taught from a young age that when an older person gives instructions, you must obey, no questions asked. So what happens? The child is given instructions, usually by somebody, even in their family or a friend of their parents, and they obey, and that's how they end up being sexually abused. Worse still, when the abuse comes to light, the families often conspire to cover it up. Why? Because a big person should not be disgraced. This makes us poor, because that child who was sexually abused gets mentally damaged and may have had the talent and the potential to create enormous value, to create the next SpaceX, the next Apple, but they will not fulfill their potential because their growth mentally, physically, emotionally has been stunted by a traumatic event. So, what do we need to do to be successful in Africa in light of this? We need to recognize and shed off this part of our cultural perspective. We need to exchange reverence for seniority for respect for seniority. If you want to be successful in Africa, it doesn't mean you have to become less African. It means that while you will be respectful of your seniors, those older than you, those with higher titles, you do not have to have reverence for them. You can be respectful and disagree with them. You can be respectful and disappoint them. You do not have to have reverence for them. Because as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as somebody who wants to be successful in Africa, it is important that you are able to speak truth to your seniors. Also, once you have shed that reverence for seniority from yourself and your own behaviors, then you need to then also introduce that to your organization. Encourage those whom you lead to have respect for seniority, but not reverence for seniority. Demonstrate it in your decisions. Do not simply promote based on tenure or based on age, but promote based on competence and character. Challenge when people want to do that, so that they understand that these behaviors of simply promoting and giving responsibility based on age will not be tolerated in your company. This is how you ensure that you can be more successful in Africa. When every African is able to let go of reverence for seniority and instead adopt respect for seniority, being able to recognize, speak truth to power, and promote based on competence and character and not tenure and age, then you will be successful in Africa. And when millions of Africans are doing this, we will transform our beloved continent into the high-income continent that we all want. We have now come to the end of today's episode. I do hope that you have learned a bit more about becoming successful in Africa. Remember, this is the first of the 5 aspects of culture that I am going to share with you about what keeps us away from being successful. So remember, shed reverence, adopt respect for seniority. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Please tell your friends about it, because together we can transform our beloved continent of Africa. I'll see you next week.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.